Welcome to Scale Without Chaos, the podcast on business growth, visionary leadership, and scalable systems. Each week, you'll hear real stories, the messy parts, and the proven strategies that help leaders grow without burning out their team or themselves. And yes, you'll definitely hear a few spicy takes along the way. Here are some highlights from this week's episode. That one exercise stuck with my team to the point where they went back the next day and started revising all their timelines and double checking and making sure that they had everything that they needed. And now, this week's episode. Hello. Welcome back to Scale Without Chaos. I'm your host, Samantha Reel. I have been thinking a lot about what this podcast stands for. Scale Without Chaos is all about business growth, visionary leadership, and scalable systems. I love that line. I think it's really the true meaning or the true necessities of what it takes to build a scalable business. So it all kind of fits together. But I realized that recently we've been going into some really high level stuff around all three of those topics and not really digging into some details around here are things that you can do today that will help you to remove some friction and to grow your team and to just kind of take out some of that stress as you're trying to grow your business, as you're trying to scale. So today's episode is all about the visionary leadership section of Scale Without Chaos. And I want to jump into some micro moments with teams and how you build rapport with your team and trust and really improve confidence in them and honestly get them to perform at their true potential. That's what we're really going for here, is to get everyone to work together, row in the same direction, and be really working at their optimal capacity. And what does that look like? I have in my career had the opportunity to what I will call inherit a few different teams. These teams have all been really good at what they do. So really very good individual contributors who are at the top of their game. They know everything about their individual area of expertise. They are really driven. These people have been really driven and have honestly worked so well together before I even got there. The reason that I joined these particular organizations in the roles that I did, the leadership roles that I was, is because one, they didn't exist before. So it was a new need, something that the leadership team identified, oh, it would be really good to have a person in this role. So I joined in those capacities, or in situations where I was replacing someone else, but the team had already been created. And so those are really interesting situations to be in as a leader, where you're not necessarily building your team from scratch, where you have the opportunity to set your expectations from the beginning. It's you're walking in, there's already camaraderie, there's already relationships, and you're now part of it. And not only that, you're now their boss, right? So you've got this additional layer of, oh, what's going to happen and how do you kind of start to build trust and build rapport with your team. So let me talk about how I did that. The first few weeks, all I did was ask questions. That's a big deal. I asked questions. I tried to understand what was going on. I didn't offer any opinions. I just started documenting things. I listed everything out. And I had a notebook. I would write everything in it. And honestly, most of the stuff that went into the notebook never saw the light of day again. It was things that we were able to resolve fairly quickly or make a small tweak. And people didn't even know that I even wrote it down. There was one thing, though, that was across all of my teams that I inherited where a lot of confidence or a lot of kind of negative just perception existed around the team. And I'll tell you which team, because I think in a lot of cases, this would be the same thing. So I was taking over in all of those cases. I was working with the marketing team. Now, marketing teams are, they can be known for, and in this particular case, they were being kind of like the DMV. And I say that with love for all my marketers that are listening out there, kind of like the DMV, where they get a lot of requests from all over the business for the most random things at any particular point in time. It can be from another part of the organization asking if they have any swag. It can be, hey, we should go to this trade show. None of which actually fit into the overall strategy and pushing towards the goals that the team is actually associated with. So in order to protect themselves from that, they create process, which is great. That's exactly what they should be doing. But they create these processes, and sometimes those processes can be a little rigid and can be a little too much. And there is a point in time. I know I'm sure some people were like, Sam, we thought we'd never hear you say this, but there is such thing as too much process. It's got to be a balance. There is always such thing as too much, and it is always possible to get there. So these teams had what they considered to be a reputation. And I noticed that that was a theme through all three of them, but it was a theme in general. So what I did was I called an all team meeting, and there was no agenda, which I would actually recommend adding an agenda because I think that freaked some people out a little bit. But there was no agenda, but we all came together, and I introduced it in this way. I said, what we're going to do today is we are going to write down all of the attributes that we think someone would say if I were to go out to this leader or this leader or this leader. If I were to go out to the rest of the business and say, describe the marketing team, what do you think they would say? And so we identified it. There were slides worth of information. It was things like, we're difficult to work with. We're too rigid. We're the DMV was the one that actually came up. Things like that. Very negative. There were some that were things that they were smart. So there were those that kind of came to the forefront once we started digging a little bit further. But pretty much for the most part, all of the initial ones were very negative. But we sat through and we actually listed them all out. And I said, okay, great. So we have all this. Now let's go to a new page. What do we want people to say about us when they mention the marketing team? What do we want them to use for words, adjectives to describe us? Things like thought leader, experts in their field, easy to work with, just that kind of vein of adjective came out. And so we filled another whole slide. And I said, okay, great. This is excellent. What I want you to do is think about this list. Think about this list as we're going through all of our work over the next few weeks. And I want you to just keep it in the back of your mind. That was my only directive to them. My only directive. I let that list sit for a month. It was a month. And I called another all staff meeting. These were fairly frequent. I like to have meetings with my team to talk about leadership development like this. And so I brought them back after a month, and I pulled up those lists again. And I said, okay, what about this list has changed? That was, remember, all I did was ask them to think about it. What about this list has changed? So we started with the negative one first. And they were like, well, we haven't heard DMV for a little while. And I said, oh, interesting. Why? Well, because we found an easier way to work through that process. And I said, oh, okay, great. So let's use strike through. We'll cross that one off the list. Do we feel like that's good? Okay, strike it off. So we struck it off. And then there were a few others that we removed. And then we went to the positive one. So what do we want people to say about us? And I had someone in the back go, oh, I heard this person say that about the marketing team the other day. Oh, great. Let's circle that. By the time we got to 3 months, the entire negative list was gone and the positive list was all circled. And I kept bringing it up. I actually brought it up a year later. I pulled it back to the forefront just because I like to revisit these things again. Pulled it back to the forefront and I said, is there anything on this list that we feel is still in play? I know we haven't seen this for a little while. Is there something that we feel is still in play? And one of the members of my team stood up and said, no, I can't believe this was ever us. All by just identifying and thinking about the where you are to the vision of where you want to be. Simple, really simple. All it takes for you to run that is some time and 2 slides on a slide deck. So any way to record it where you can continually bring it back up. So when you're thinking about how you want to change behavior of your team and what you want to do to be a visionary leader, sometimes it really is just as simple as asking them to think about it. It really is. So let me give you another one. I I really enjoy doing something with my team once a month. I've done it more frequently if I felt that the team needed it. But I really enjoy doing something with my team where we have a meeting that is an hour, 1 hour, and it is not work related on purpose. And I started doing this very early on, actually before COVID. But during COVID, it became even more important because everyone was remote and we needed ways to connect. Um, I started just bringing everyone together for an hour. And I would give everyone questions during the meeting, or I would give them challenges during the meeting, something to just allow people to interact with each other. So let me give you an example of one that I did in person. The in-person stuff was really fun because we had the opportunity to sit in a conference room together, work together as a team. And so it also made things a little bit easier, of course, because you're all in person. I noticed that the team was having a hard time prioritizing. It wasn't their fault. They were, well, I mean, some of it was just thinking through things, but it was mostly around they were getting lots of requests and they weren't fully thinking through what would happen if I did this request versus another one. And so we ended up having some issues with prioritization. And they were being asked at the time to build a lot of really big, complex plans, project management plans for projects that were going to last a year. And so there were multiple teams involved. It was a big deal. And they were struggling with that too. They hadn't been trained through that and how to do that. So I brought everyone together and beyond the normal kind of how I intro the meeting, I said, all right, today we're going to do a planning activity. And everyone kind of groaned a little bit because they'd been planning a lot. And I said, I absolutely understand. But what I'm going to ask you to do is I need some help planning Sawyer's birthday party. And they were like, what? And a few people were like, "Are we really using our hour?" And I'm sure my CEO, if he came in, would have also said, "Are we really using this billable, this hour, to plan Sawyer's birthday party?" And I was like, "Yep, we are. We're going to plan the birthday party. So here's what we're going to do. I want everyone to be in charge of a specific thing that is related to the birthday party. So one person can do invitations and guest list, one person can do music, one can do food, one can do entertainment, but I want everyone to be responsible for one of those areas. And then I want you to write down the top 3 things that you need to be able to plan, like your top 3 tasks to be able to plan that. And I want you to put them each on an individual sticky note. And so they did. So we had everyone planning out things. I gave them about 10 minutes. And actually, I don't think I even needed 10 minutes, a few minutes to write down, here are the top things you would do for music. You need to create a playlist. You need to make sure you have the equipment. If you're doing the guest list, you need to make sure you confirm the guest list and you need to send out the invitations and people need to RSVP. So they were tasked with breaking down all of these things. And so I asked them to then, all right, in order of what you think needs to happen, put everything up on the wall so that now we have a timeline. We'll have a plan of what we need to do with Sawyer's birthday party. The first thing, I think it was just because he was super excited and eager. The first thing someone put up there was create playlist. Like out of all of the things that we need to do for our birthday party is that we need to create a playlist. So that was the first thing that went up in the wall. And I already knew that we were going to have a great time with this. So I waited and they put everything up on the wall. Everything was there. So they had a beautiful party planned out too. It had a petting zoo. There was a bouncy house. We had an actual DJ. I did tell them the budget was no issue. We had a whole bunch of food. Everything was great. And I said, okay, this is awesome, guys. This is a really great party plan. Can you tell me what's missing? And everyone sat there for a few minutes and was like, no, Sam, what's missing? And I said, "You forgot to mail out the invitations." So the team had created this absolutely beautiful party, would have been so much fun for any 5-year-old, but no one came. And that one exercise stuck with my team to the point where they went back the next day and started revising all their timelines and double checking and making sure that they had everything that they needed. All because you take that as an opportunity for training, something that's not work related, something that's maybe a little silly, and put it into something that is actionable and relatable and tangible. It is a direct correlation to something that they are doing in their work right now. And it worked. Those plans, the business plans, the project management plans that came out over the next few months, they were checked. They had everything there. They made sure that they validated everything with people who were in different departments. If there was something that was missed, it was a true mistake, and we allow those. So it was great. So those are just 2 ways that you can do micro training moments with your team. Some of them might be a little bit interesting and might be a little silly, helping to build trust and get them to really work at their optimal capacity. So if you have any questions, as usual, please send me a message, send me a DM. I love to hear feedback. I would love to hear if you have any leadership development, micro leadership development things that can fit within an hour that you've done with your teams that made a big difference in the long run. Tell me about those. I absolutely would love to hear about those so I can feature them here on the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. I appreciate it more than you know. Subscribe if you are a frequent listener. Even if you're not, more content like this. This is pretty much what I do. Have a great day until next time. Thank you for tuning in to Scale Without Chaos. If today's episode sparked new ideas or gave you a fresh perspective, do me a favor. Hit that follow button, subscribe for new episodes, and share this with someone who's going through what we talked about today. This podcast is all about visionary leadership, sustainable business growth, and the systems that make scale possible. For more content, free resources, and behind-the-scenes insights, connect with me on LinkedIn, follow along on Instagram at Scale Without Chaos, and subscribe to the newsletter.